Hello, welcome to the top 10 most popular commanders of May, and as always we are starting with the most popular one because that is the one you should be most interested in. Right now we are in a bit of a transition, so there are some more Final Fantasy characters coming up, but for now Teval is still the most popular one and has been so for the last month as well. Of course, he is new, coming from the new Tarkir Dragonstorm set, and I think what people mostly like about him is the fact that Teval really works well with a bunch of things, things that people really love. So recursion is one of them, and getting a bunch of lands. So that is the perfect thing that you want to have in your Sultai deck. And that makes Teval really flexible for the color combination. So oops. Sort of foreshadowing for the Ur-Dragon, but the Ur-Dragon is gone now. I need to say that every video. But what is good with Teval, as it is the second time Teval is in here, we will do one different thing every time. And for now we want to look at the things that are good with him. It's pretty simple actually, and you can really build around with it in the way that you like it. But what you need is a bunch of mill. Hedron Crab is really good because it works with mill and landfall. And of course, Teval will bring back lands. So whenever he attacks, you mill 3 cards already, but then you get to return a land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. And that means that you trigger Hedron Crab, making you mill even more cards. And that can synergize with a bunch of things that are in your deck. Other things you want are recursion, but also ways to maybe sacrifice creatures because and do something with it, because Teval's second ability is to create a 2/2 black zombie druid creature token whenever one or more cards leave your graveyard. So you want to have cards leave your graveyard, you will create new 2/2 tokens. And then if you can make sure that you keep filling your deck, then of course this recursion theme will be really strong. I think Victimize, which is a cheaper version of recursion, for the cost of sacrificing a creature, is really good here, because you sacrifice a creature but you will be making more creatures because creatures will be leaving your graveyard as well from this card. And other things you want are ways to also work well with things leaving your graveyard. So Insidious Roots is of course a famous example from Standard that says whenever one or more creature cards leave your graveyard, you create a 0/1 land creature token, which you can then sacrifice for your other ways of recurring creatures. Then we are starting with Final Fantasy at number 2. So maybe this is not your jam, but it is a very famous thing that will help get more people to Magic, and I like that part about it really well. And Vivi, I think, is mostly popular here because it is such a popular character for Final Fantasy. And just grabbing my notes here, but Vivi, so I do know that it is a fan favorite character, but throughout these Final Fantasy moments that we will have in the next few months, please tell me everything you know about the characters, because I did watch a 10-hour video about the lore, but I think I still don't know everything. So just tell me, and I won't go into the lore too much, but I know that Vivi is a really popular character. I think one of the most popular ones for a long time. And also Vivi really adds something new, which a lot of new Final Fantasy cards don't do in Magic the Gathering right now, because they should be simple. And Vivi really plays into the part where Final Fantasy fans should already know a bunch about gaming, and the cards can be a little bit harder to play with. So Vivi says for 0 mana, you can activate this ability. So instantly you can activate this ability and it doesn't cost you anything. Then you add X mana in any combination of blue or red mana, where X is Vivi's power. So right at the beginning, Vivi will have 0 power, meaning you can play this ability but you won't get anything, so you will need to strengthen Vivi, which is a bit of a play on the usual archetype that Vivi is all about, which is non-creature spells, or, well, spells that you can sling around and play a bunch of. And Vivi then says, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a +1 counter on Vivi and it deals 1 damage to each opponent, which is really strong because dealing 1 damage to each opponent for every non-creature spell can really storm off, especially because Vivi keeps strengthening himself. So this is a really unique mechanic because it combines non-creature spell slinging, which is a normal theme, with strengthening your commander through non-creature spells, but also through other means that you could have. This makes it a new kind of mechanic which many other characters from Final Fantasy have failed to do, because they should be strong, which they are, but also a bit simpler for people to learn the game with these commander decks, which are already bringing a bunch of things and are already really complicated to learn, because you have maybe 40-50 cards that you need to learn. Or at least a bunch. So for example, Cloud just works with equipment, which is for Magic fans not really a new thing. Or Yuna works with +1 counters, which is really a simple thing for many Magic players, but it is a strong thing that you can do and that can really get you into the game. So they are good as well, but I think Vivi just gets more popular because it is a bit of a unique play on things that Magic players also don't get to see, and it is a very popular character in Final Fantasy as well. So it hits the balance for me. Then Edgar, which has been in here for 5 times already, so we will look at a bit of weapon design for him. And as you can see, Edgar Markov is of course a very regal man that already got a weapon. But I think we should do something different. As you can see in the art of Edgar, the weapon is a bit more holy, a bit more looking as if he is the good guy here. But really he is not. So I think if we personify Edgar Markov into a weapon, it should be a lot darker, but it should also have notes of blood themed through there, because Edgar Markov is all about blood. Through family, of course he is a vampire, which makes him bloody, but also because he uses blood as a magical source to strengthen himself, but also the vampires around him. So I think that should be signified in this sword. Next up is Zurgo, which has stayed in spot 4 and has been here for the 2nd time as well, coming from Tarkir, so we will talk about the cards good with Zurgo. So the concept of Zurgo is create a bunch of tokens, then have them die. The tokens he makes already die on their own, but they die on their end step, meaning that Zurgo's ability will make sure that each opponent loses 1 life. You can see how that is a strong ability. But when the tokens die in combat, which the Mardu love, then you will draw a card, which is stronger. So you will want to have them die during their battle. So what is good in this deck? Well, a few things. You will want to create a bunch of small tokens, because they will be used by Zurgo, and Zurgo will be the output of the engine that you are building, but preferably you create a bunch of tokens through other means. So cards like Thalys are really strong here because they double the amount of tokens you eventually get, making a bunch of 1/1s, which might not die during combat, but will sometime in the future die and deal at least 1 damage to each opponent. So that will be a strong ability here. You will need things to sacrifice your creatures, like Skull Clamp, which you can put on a 1/1 to make them die immediately because they get 1 less toughness, and then you draw 2 cards for every one of those tokens that are sacrificed, so really strong there. And cards like Divine Visitation, which stop your creatures from dying immediately, but because you are making so many tokens, you will want cards like these that strengthen your tokens. In this case, they make 4/4 white angel tokens with flying and vigilance instead of the tokens you are creating. Having them enter and attack immediately will be very strong. Then Felothar, which has gained a bunch of places, I think because people are seeing the strength in Felothar. And finally, the Defender Or well, it was popular before, but I think it has gotten a recursion because of Felothar. So things that are good with him are still the same things. What he does is he says, firstly, each creature you control assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power, which is needed in this deck, but also makes Felothar a 5/5 immediately, so a very big boy already. Then creatures you control can attack as though they didn't have Defender, so that is everything that you need in a Defender deck, making them able to attack, or enabling them to attack, and also enabling them to do damage equal to their toughness. So the two things you need are right there. But then he adds something. For 3 mana you can tap Felothar, your 5/5, to sacrifice another creature, and then draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness. Then you discard cards equal to his power. If, for example, you would be sacrificing a 0/13 or something, you would draw 13 cards, and then you would have to discard 0, which is just drawing you 13 cards. And Tree of Redemption, for example, has the great ability to exchange your life total with this creature's toughness. So it could be even bigger, but then you will have to sacrifice Tree of Redemption, which you usually don't want to do. But still, that's a bunch of cards already if it's just a 0/13 for 4 mana. And it can be a 13/13 while it is attacking, basically. Other things you need are cards like Tower Defense, which may give your creatures even more toughness. This card basically says 2 mana instant, give your creatures +5/+5 and reach. And other cards that love big toughnesses, like Towering Titan, which says it enters with X counters, where X is the total toughness of other creatures you control. Meaning if you have, for example, Felothar and Tree of Redemption out, like that, Towering Titan will enter as an 18/18. Without Felothar already this is an 18/18, but you could also, for example, sacrifice Towering Titan to draw your deck, probably. Also, Towering Titan can sacrifice a creature with Defender and give all of your creatures Trample, which is one of the weaknesses of a Defender deck, because they usually don't really have evasion, because they shouldn't be attacking. So in this way you can give them evasion and win the game because of this Towering Titan. So definitely a finisher here. Next up, again back to Final Fantasy. Not sure how you say it, honestly. Y'shtola, I think, Knight's Blessed. One thing that really makes her popular is the fact that it's a cat lady with a worm's eye view, which works really well with Magic fans. Yeah. But also it's a fairly popular character for Final Fantasy. Not one of the most popular, I think. A more recent one that got popular, but really got a spike because of Magic. And that didn't really happen for many of the other characters. Cloud, for example, didn't really get more popular because of Magic. But this one did. And one last reason I can think of is that Esper Spellslinger commanders can be really strong on their own, but they are a bit bland. So I would say perfect if you are starting with commander and you aren't really looking for a complicated commander. But I would say really great commanders to start with should warp the game in a sort of way. Y'shtola just says at the beginning of each end step, you might draw a card. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or greater, Y'shtola deals 2 damage to each opponent and you gain 2 life. Meaning you want to play a bunch of non-creature spells. That's basically it. So she is the output to your engine for non-creature spell decks, but doesn't really add too much things that are really interesting, but it does teach you how to play with instants, for example, so that you can draw more cards on other people's end steps as well. Then Kaalia of the Fast, which has been here for the 6th time, so now we will look at the ultimate sidekick, which is a creature card, doesn't need to be legendary, with the same colors exactly, so needs to be Mardu, and that works well with Kaalia so that it can be sort of second commander or something. It's a bit of a thing that doesn't really exist, so make sure that if you want to play with ultimate sidekicks, you ask other players around your table if it is okay. I think for Kaalia, Ishin 2 Heavens as 1 is the perfect one. I usually want to stay away from just another Kaalia, which of course will be strong. But Ishin 2 Heavens as 1 is really perfect here, because Kaalia works with attacking triggers and Ishin will double that trigger. Then many dragons, I think some demons also work with attacking triggers, so Ishin really works well there. And having these two as your two commanders will definitely make this for an interesting deck, I would say, because both of them really warp the game in their own different ways. Then Ureni, which is here for the second time, and next up we will have another one that is here for the second time, but this one was here for Tarkir. And Ureni says whenever it enters or attacks, you look at the top 8 cards of your library and may put a dragon onto the battlefield from those 8 cards. And then you put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So you can play 1 dragon for free. So it's basically a light Ur-dragon there. Ureni really works well with dragons, of course, but also has an enter the battlefield trigger or an attack trigger. So any one of those that you can double or make use of more times will be strong. So of course use dragons like Miriam, which also double your dragons, or Ghostly Flicker to exile your Ureni and then have it enter the battlefield again, or Scourge of the Throne, which will enable you to attack multiple times, which means that you can attack with Ureni as well, because it will be untapped because of the Scourge of the Throne, and then you will be able to get more dragons. So you need a bunch of dragons in there, which is a bit dangerous because you will still need a bunch of ramp as well. So there are limited spots in here, but I think Ureni can be pretty broken with cards like these. Then Kotis, which is I think a really interesting one here for the second time too, from Tarkir and not from a precon. Kotis wants to be an Ultron commander, which means that you want to strengthen Kotis so that you can deal a bunch of damage, and because of his ability, when you deal damage to a player, you exile the top X cards equal to the damage dealt, and you may cast any number of spells with mana value X or less from among them without paying their mana costs. So you can play your opponent's spells for free. What is good with this? Well, Felix is really good here, because if Kotis would deal damage to your opponents, its ability triggers and it will trigger twice, so of course that is good. You want ways to strengthen Kotis, like with Rancor, which will give it 2 power, but also Trample, which is evasion and will be needed for Kotis. And it recurs, so you lessen a weakness of Voltron commanders. I keep saying Ultron. Voltron commanders, because many enchantments don't go back, and then you will need an enchantment and your commander back again, and that will be a costly investment. Other things that are good are ways to give it evasion, for example with flying, and of course you keep strengthening it. Sephiroth is a really popular character, and I really like this card too. It is mono black, which is a bit hard to start with, but if you have a bit more experience with magic, I would definitely say Sephiroth is a really cool commander. Or if you want to take some time learning the game and why it can be a bit hard to play with just one color, you will need to learn about the weaknesses of the color and the strengths to really play to it. But I think this will be a really cool commander if you get to learn it, and if you are really a fan of the character, maybe you should just go ahead and learn it. Sephiroth is a bit harder to learn on its own. Sephiroth says, whenever it enters or attacks, you may sacrifice another creature, and if you do, you draw a card. So this is a light version of its one-winged angel. He wants to sacrifice other versions of Sephiroth or stuff like that, so that he can, strengthen his plans to one day conquer the world. And whenever another creature dies, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So through his plotting, he is weakening his enemies. And if this is the 4th time this ability has resolved this turn, transform Sephiroth. So meaning that if 4 creatures die, you will get to trigger this ability 4 times. And if you have sacrificed 4 other creatures, you will transform him into the one-winged angel. And that is a stronger version of Sephiroth. So it's, instead of just a 3/3, a 5/5 with flying, which is really cheap for 3 mana, but of course you needed to do some stuff to get here. And then it has the Supernova ability, which says, as it transforms, you get an emblem with whenever a creature dies, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So you want actually to transform Sephiroth multiple times, but an emblem means that when Sephiroth dies, the emblem will stay around. So even if you just have it on your command zone, you will still be able to kill a bunch of creatures and drain your opponents for 1 life every time. And Sephiroth also says this upgraded ability of the first ability of Fabled Soldier. Whenever Sephiroth attacks, you may sacrifice any number of other creatures, and if you do, you draw that many cards. So you can choose how many creatures you are sacrificing now. So definitely you want to build around sacrificing creatures, creating a bunch of tokens, and then drawing a bunch of tokens or cards because of that, for example. And you are draining your opponent every time. Or you can find a way to maybe blink Sephiroth or transform him multiple times so that you can have multiple emblems that will drain your opponents every time. And that was it. I would love to know if you want to learn more about the Final Fantasy cards. And I would love to learn as well if you think another card should be more popular than these. And with that, I'd like to thank you for watching and have a nice day. Bye.